Why did you refuse the National Guard on January 6th?
Shut up. I did not refuse the National Guard. The president didn't send it. Why are you coming here with Republican talking points as if you're a serious journalist?
They had a recess session. It's a complete victory.
McGovern's in the chair now and they're proceeding.
Who's in the chair?
Mr. McGovern.
So what's the prospect? We're going to stay here all day, the rest of our lives, or what?
According to Bongino, the FBI obtained call logs from January 4th to January 7th, all inbound and outbound calls. Oh my goodness. From their personal phones. Nancy Pelosi snaps under pressure, getting asked a bunch of questions by an amazing journalist over here with Lindell TV, who's under a lot of legal scrutiny from the rigged court systems as we speak. But he had a journalist out there who was reporting on this, and you're going to see the meltdown for the ages from Nancy Pelosi when she's asked about January 6th. And what's so troubling about this is Nancy, we think the lady doth protest too much, as Shakespeare might say. But this is easily rebutted by her own statements. Nancy Pelosi was on video saying, I take responsibility for this. I'm the Speaker of the House. The House Sergeant at Arms reports to me. We have a lot of influence over the Capitol Hill police, and it's our building. So clearly she's responsible for it. But what the J6 committee did is they hid all of these videos that people are now asking about. They buried them. Liz Cheney didn't want to include that in her fake committee hearings over and over again because it would have been damning to their case. Instead, they tried to blame Trump for this, like it was totally unexpected and Trump didn't want to secure anything, which is not true because Mayor Muriel Bowser sent a message to him, a letter on January 5th explaining, we don't want your National Guard here, okay? Chris Miller, acting Secretary of Defense, who was planning on deploying people, they said don't send them. So Nancy Pelosi is having to reconcile all of those bad facts. She was clearly responsible for the security of the congressional building along with the House Senate Majority Leader. But here is how this went down. Nancy Pelosi melting down outside of Washington, D.C.
Congresswoman Pelosi, are you at all concerned that the new January 6th committee will find you liable for that day? Are you at all concerned about the new January 6th committee finding you liable for that day? Why did you refuse the National Guard on January 6th?
Shut up. I did not refuse the National Guard. The president didn't send it. Why are you coming here with Republican talking points as if you're a serious journalist?
It's
the
on
American
video.
people want to know. We still have questions. Thank you. Congresswoman Pelosi.
All right, so not only is the video clip just outstanding because Nancy Pelosi is so mad, right? That is finger in the face. Look at that. Oh my goodness. That's like feral. And that final smile is just the icing on the cake. She's like, I got it. That was so good. I couldn't have asked for anything better. Thank you, Nancy. Remember this report, August 28, 2024. We have a new January 6th committee that is now being formed to actually investigate what ultimately happened and not just be an illegally constituted cover-up committee, which is all it was. Remember, Nancy Pelosi was supposed to follow H.R. 503, the authorizing legislation that created the committee that had a bunch of rules about how it would be constituted and so on and so forth. And she just ignored it. Didn't like Kevin McCarthy's nominees, so kicked all the Republicans off. There was no real minority body at all. She just appointed Liz Cheney and Kinzinger and called it a bipartisan committee, appointing them in violation of the own authorizing legislation, which said it had to have 13 members. It didn't. It had 9. And she just made it up. So the whole thing was illegal according to their own rules. And then it was corrupt in its actual constitution. Its actual production. Constitution was illegal. The production was also corrupt. And they found a bunch of additional materials. But today, back then in 24, just to refresh our recollection, the Committee on Oversight is publishing new documentary footage that was recorded by Alexandra Pelosi on January 6th. And it was finally produced to HBO. Now, the bulk of these new videos show that then Speaker Nancy was repeatedly saying, I take full responsibility. She also discussed the firing of Capitol Hill Chief of Police, Stephen Sund, who wrote a great book about this, by the way, and is a real hero explaining the truth of what happened on this. He said that they sent the National Guard to their own houses. Okay, so all of like the military leaders and all of the government oligarchs, they sent security to them, but didn't send it to the Capitol. Why is that? Well, we know why. So she was blaming him, and she stresses, and Paul Irving, still she says that blaming anyone besides Trump would be a diversionary tactic. Yeah, right. We have totally failed, she says. We have to take some responsibility for not holding the security accountable for what could have happened, said repeatedly in the the videos. Oh my God, I cannot believe the stupidity of this and more. Now, Liz Cheney and Benny Fishing Thompson had this footage, but they did not release it publicly because it was damning to their case. And they did not archive this footage at the end of the Congress or give it over to the Republicans. How come? Isn't it relevant? Aren't these videos of Nancy Pelosi inside the Capitol important for the public record? No, it wasn't, because it was damning to their case. So they deleted it. The Republicans went and had to go directly to HBO to get the footage. So when people ask that question, it's like, well, the J6 committee deleted their evidence. No, they didn't. What did they delete? Right here, the Nancy Pelosi videos, the HBO videos. They're clearly relevant. They show her inside the Capitol. Why didn't you release those? Because it didn't serve their narrative. But we now have the videos. Here was one, and I don't know if Nancy Pelosi remembers this. Maybe somebody should play this for her before she starts screaming obscenities at journalists who are asking questions in America. We have a free press.
They had a recess session. It's a complete victory for them.
McGovern's in the chair now and they're proceeding.
Who's in the chair?
Mr. McGovern.
So what's the prospect? We're going to stay here all day, the rest of our lives, or what?
So dramatic, okay? What are we gonna do? We're gonna stay here in DC for the rest of our lives? You were back in the building in like 4 hours, you weirdo. Calm down. It's really a shock to think that our elected officials really can't even comport themselves when there's like a 4-hour riot, for crying out
Here
loud.
until what? Until the National Guard decides to come and get rid of these people? Oh my God, I can't believe the stupidity of this.
Say it.
And I take full responsibility.
You should take full responsibility because you were in charge of the security for your own building. You're the Speaker of the House. And when the president was gearing up to deploy the National Guard into DC, you guys freaked out, just like you're freaking out now. Whenever Trump wants to deploy the National Guard to go get illegal aliens and stop crime from occurring all across the planet and our country, then they flip out. Same thing was happening here. Remember, this was the letter from Mayor Muriel Bowser. She said, to be clear, Chris Miller, acting Secretary of Defense, to you, Secretary of the Army, to you, Jeff Rosen, acting U.S. Attorney General, I don't want anybody sent over here. To be clear, the District of Columbia, us, we are not requesting other federal law enforcement personnel, and we discourage any additional deployment without the immediate notification to and consultation with us, if these plans are already underway. We are well trained and we're well prepared to handle this, signed by the mayor of DC. Chuck Grassley also is now explaining that the January 6th setup parlayed into a bunch of criminal investigations like the January 6th case and other cases like the classified documents case, whatever they could do to try to take out their political opponent, to sideline him, put him in jail, bankrupt him, throw him off the ballot, whatever it took to keep him from winning again. That failed big time. But here is Chuck Grassley releasing this today. He said, you know, Tim Tebow, the anti-Trump agent who violated the Hatch Act, opened Arctic Frost with other partisans and then gave the case to Jack Smith. And remember, Jack Smith was supposed to be a special counsel who was going to come and do his own independent investigation so that there's no influence and corruption from the Biden DOJ. That's the whole point. You're independent. You're special is the thesis. And that's what they kept selling us, right? But we all know he actually isn't an independent counsel. That whole statute's gone, and that whole framework that he's not independent. He works for Merrick Garland, who's in the Biden administration. And when we had arguments about disqualifying Jack Smith because he's not even a real boy, he had a very difficult time in the DOJ explaining exactly where he was. Is he independent? Is he under the executive branch? Can Garland fire him? What's going on here? Does he even fill out his oath paperwork appropriately? Like, who is this dude? He's over from the Hague. No one knew. But none of that was true. And they kept telling us that. Well, an independent counsel, special counsel. No, turns out corrupt FBI agents, in my opinion, like Tim Tebow, handed the case to them and said, we've already been setting this up for like years now. So here you go. Says, don't let the legacy media fool you, says Chuck Grassley. Arctic Frost from the FBI was partisan from the start. And here's some emails that Chuck Grassley shared today. This one is from Timothy Tebow, Washington Field Office, FBI. He says, perfect. Responding to this message, Michelle says, hey, Tim. They call him Tim. Attached is a list of the electors. In addition, we're also listing Trump. Donald Trump for President, Inc., John Eastman, Boris Epstein, and Rudy Giuliani in the case opening. Thank you. He says, oh, that's perfect. I hate those guys. They're Republicans. Perfect. Another email says, here is draft opening language we discussed. Tim said, Michelle, if you decide to work the case, please reach out to Jonathan Crabb if you require additional info, and you can begin adding to the draft as needed. We would consider this a SIM, seek CDC guidance to determine if the Barr memo applies. We also need to discuss the title and the subject. I think at a minimum, it would have the Trump campaign and unsubs in the title. Timothy Thibault, right? And he's the guy who had all of those disgusting messages and completely anti-Trump, completely partisan. And he's leading the investigation, explaining how this whole case should be opened. As he's handing it off to somebody else, you can work this case, but let me just prepare all of this corruption and then I'll just pass it off to other people, right? You don't want to execute the plan if you're a Trump hater. You give it to somebody else so you have cover for this. And as the investigation unfolded, they went after everybody. Just the News got their hands on a memo and reviewed it, and they say congressional investigators, remember we have a new J6 committee, they collected a stunning 30 million lines of phone data, mapping contacts between conservatives and the Trump White House, creating a big mind map in the name of investigating January 6th. It was a massive dragnet. People are asking questions about civil liberties and civil rights. A lot of senators saying, how dare you spy on my records? But they didn't care that much when 92 other organizations, including Turning Point and Charlie Kirk, were also being spied on, their bank accounts and everything being scrutinized. But now the senators have been caught up in this, and so they're very ornery about it. So the memo says that Adam Kinzinger was behind this. He told the FBI that phone data had been collected by a then former representative, an ex-Republican, who was a staffer on the illegal committee, who later helped Hunter Biden's legal team in their efforts to cast doubt on the laptops, okay? So a corrupt partisan who goes after Republicans and protects Democrats was the person responsible for this. The FBI memo does not reveal whether the Bureau ever took Kinzinger up on his offer, but it does reveal the sheer magnitude of a phone surveillance project in the works. And the mountainous collection of phone data were revealed to the FBI that was led by Christopher Wray in late 23 by Adam Kinzinger. The cash was offered to the Bureau on the eve of the presidential election. Okay, so the J6 committee got it, and they were going to pass it all off to the FBI so the FBI could indict some people. According to an FBI document memorializing the offer, the memo says Kinzinger told them this other, hack person called Denver Riggleman got all of the data. It's the same scam that they did with Christopher Steele and the Steele dossier. Some partisan hack creates the report, gives it to some political entity, somebody who's a friendly passes it off to the FBI does the prosecution. It's the same scam. Adam Kinzinger just got caught up in it. Now, the FBI memo, they don't ever reveal whether they took that data or whether it was just part of the J6 committee, but Kinzinger told the FBI, he said that the J6 committee linked and collected a substantial amount of telephone data and noted the FBI may already possess that data. While former Congressman Riggleman worked with the Select Committee illegal, he had a contact and was able to obtain toll information, including for White House route and switchboard numbers, all via a congressional subpoena. And they were going hog wild on that. Remember Fishing Benny Thompson? We talked a lot about, he just sent these massive pages, massive letters, like 20 pages of, I want everything. I want to know what you had for lunch and whether that showed up in your bowel movement that afternoon. Kinzinger also noted that he did not conduct the analysis, but had another partisan hack do it. In a post on his Substack, Kinzinger confirmed, yeah, he says, I had a conversation, but these were all lawful subpoenas from a corrupt, illegally constituted committee. They didn't follow their own rules. And when people sued over that, the court said, well, we can't make them do anything in their branch. Okay, so the courts, via separation of powers, couldn't say that Congress was acting legally or illegally. It's their business. And they just let them do it. So the illegal committee issued subpoenas and everybody just honored them. And the courts didn't do anything because many of the judges who heard these issues were acting cowardly. While the January 6th committee subpoenas were public, the size and the scope of this data was not previously known. Somebody estimated 18 million lines of data, but they said 30 million lines of data. Also revealed that they went after, the senators are furious about this. They don't really care if we get spied on. They're like, but Lindsey Graham, you saw what I was doing on January 5th? Zelensky came over that night. So now Congress is looking into things. So we've got Jack Smith, who is getting some scrutiny from the Judiciary Committee. And it's Jim Jordan again, baby. He loves drafting letters, and we love reading them. Thanks, Jim. And he sent this one over to Jack Smith. We'll see what happens to it and whether Jack Smith appears and says anything. But they write over to Jack. They say, all right, Jack, listen, we've been working hard on this. Okay, we've already done 2 interviews with Thomas Wyndham, another senior assistant to your hack team that was taking over the case from Timothy Thibault and prosecuting everybody in conjunction with the January 6th committee and the Biden administration. So we deposed Thomas Wyndham, who is on the case, and also the other guy that we've talked a lot about here, Jay Bratt. And we've got those depositions and we may read through them this week if there's interest. They're not that long because they just pleaded the 5th. So So those were not helpful, Jack. We tried to talk to those other co-prosecutors. They didn't say anything because they're freaked out about this. Like, oh yeah, we were definitely trying to take Trump out. So they just shut up. So now we have to talk to you. So hopefully you come in and talk to us, Jack, since you're a civil servant and a public servant and all the things. They write, all right, Jack, listen. Since the beginning of this Congress, we have conducted oversight of operations by your office, the office of the special counsel that you led. Specifically, you and your team's partisan and politically motivated prosecutions of Trump and his co-defendants. Now, among the disturbing tactics employed in that prosecution by you, your team sought to silence President Trump by restricting his public statements about the case. As we covered here, Trump was gagged. So will Comey be gagged? Will Tish be gagged? Conducted an unnecessary and abusive raid of his residence where they went through Melania's drawers and Barron's drawers, these disgusting FBI agents exploiting the law because they hate Trump. Attempted to improperly pressure defense counsel Stanley Woodward, got abused by Jay Bratt. Hey, Stanley, just have your client Walt Nauta just, implicate Trump. And then you'll become a judge in Washington, D.C. We can make that happen for you. Remember that? With the promise of political patronage, and they also manipulated key evidence in the investigation, moving all the files around, putting fake cover photos on there, leaking these documents to the media, and perverting all of the evidence. They pulled the boxes out. The boxes were in different order. Nobody knew what happened. Some were taken out. Placeholders were put in. It was a disaster. These actions undermine the integrity of the criminal justice system, Jack, and violated the core responsibility of federal prosecutors, which is to do justice. Now, as the committee continues its oversight, we need your testimony to understand the full extent of how Biden and Harris weaponized federal law enforcement. Now, to date, Jack, the committee has done some interviews with some of your hack colleagues, including Jay Bratt, J.P. Cooney, and Thomas Windham. Now, in addition, we've also obtained internal FBI documents, that show the FBI, with the likely involvement of prosecutors that were later assigned to your team, that they went and they surveilled Scott Perry, a representative, prior to seizing his cell phone in a stunning breach of constitutional separations of powers. Your abusive surveillance of a sitting member of Congress did not stop there. Earlier this week, the FBI, at the direction of Kash Patel, released an alarming document showing that your team requested and obtained private phone records for at least 8 senators and 1 representative during your scam investigation called Arctic Frost. These documents reinforce the conclusion that your office conducted politically motivated investigations. Yeah. Now, although the committee has learned new information from these interviews, several members of your team failed to fully cooperate with our inquiry. You're kidding. Lifetime public servants, career prosecutors at the DOJ, all pleading the fifth and not talking to Congress about anything. For example, during a transcribed interview with the committee, former senior assistant special counsel Thomas Windham, who was all over the case, we read many motions signed by Thomas Windham, one of the smarter ones of the bunch. Jack didn't do much of anything other than act as a figurehead. Jay Bratt was, I think, the in-person person, and Thomas Windham wrote a lot of the more, technical stuff. But they brought him in here. He relied on overbroad and unreasonable interpretation of grand jury secrecy protections. I can't talk about that. That's all protected by the grand jury. Now, after the committee subpoenaed Windham to actually compel his testimony, he then invoked various ill-defined privileges and objections. He says, well, I can't talk about that. Grand jury privilege. Can't talk about that. Some other executive privilege. Can't talk about that. Fifth Amendment. He refused to answer 70 questions. Thank you for your public service, Thomas Windham. According to Windham's lawyers, the foundation of Windham's decision to decline to answer is his constitutional right to silence embodied by the Fifth Amendment. Yeah, a lot of that going on right now. For instance, Windham even refused to answer the question, how many other members of Congress were investigated as part of Arctic Frost and Jack Smith? If it's all legal and above board, why don't you just tell us who else you surveilled? Also, refused to answer if there are records of additional, quote, members of Congress that were swept up by legal process. Doesn't want to talk about that. Question to Thomas. Hey, Thomas, how many other members of Congress were investigated as part of Jack Smith's Arctic Frost investigation that he inherited? I respectfully decline to respond for the reasons stated by my counsel. Great job, Thomas. Another question for you. Were there any records of members of Congress that were swept up by the legal process in your investigation? I respectfully decline to respond for the reasons stated by my counsel. Great job, Windham. In the special counsel's report, it talks about evidence from congressional staff. Were those congressional staff connected only to Congressman Perry? I respectfully decline to respond to the question stated by my counsel. Great! What an amazing civil servant. Great job. Similarly, another hack called Jay Bratt, who was terrible, and my understanding is looks like an Oompa Loompa in person. I think we got some insight on that description from Julie Kelly, who saw him in court. It was like, man, interesting looking fella. He invoked the Fifth Amendment 75 times, and this was the same hack who was trying to pressure Stanley Woodward, saying, just make your client flip on us. Totally detestable and contemptible behavior. Make him flip and we'll make you a judge. That's how sick these people are. He refused to answer questions necessary for the committee's oversight, including whether the purpose of these documents was to affect the 2024 presidential election. Obviously it was. Whether the raid on Mar-a-Lago was intended to capture political intelligence. Great question. Who he met with during his 3 visits to the Biden-Harris White House. How come the special counsel's team was going over to Trump's political opponent's house and hanging out with them? And why he pressured defense counsel to make his client take a deal so he could get political patronage. Here's what Brat said, another career civil servant, a career prosecutor. Mr. Brat, question for you. Was the presidential records investigation of President Trump intended for the purpose of harming him politically? On advice of counsel, I respectfully assert my Fifth Amendment rights and decline to answer the question. Of course you do. Hey, Jay, was the Justice Department trying to weaken the president because he was the chief political rival of Joe Biden and you hate his guts? Same answer. Was the point of the investigation to affect the outcome of the election? Same answer. Why doesn't he just say no? Was the DOJ trying to weaken the president because you love Obama and Biden? Same answer. Womp. Was the raid on Mar-a-Lago intended to capture the political intelligence against the president to advantage Joe Biden? Same answer. Ignoring all of the congressional oversight. And if they're just, acting above board and you can defend yourself, just talk, right? That's what they said to our side. Now, as the special counsel, you are ultimately responsible for the prosecutorial misconduct and constitutional abuses of your office, Jack. All their misbehavior is attributable to you. And your misdeeds were so flagrant that the Justice Department's Office of Professional Responsibility has now confirmed to the committee, November of last year, that it had opened up an inquiry into the tactics of your office, and he should be disbarred immediately. And senators are now calling for that too. In fact, Senator Tuberville said that he needs to be in jail. Senator Marsha Blackburn says disbar him immediately. Then we'll talk about jail. Over the course of our oversight, this is how bad Jack is too. We have written you several times, Jack, to request documents relating to your politicized investigation, and you failed to respond, ignoring Congress. Accordingly, to further our oversight, Jack, the committee requires your testimony at a transcribed interview. We want you to also please produce the following information that's in your possession, anything from January 20th, 2021 to the present. So bring these documents with you when you come in. 1, all documents and communications relating or referring to the Attorney General order that actually appoints you as special counsel, which was illegitimate because he was never a U.S. attorney. We also want all documents between you, these are all shredded, long time ago, shredded, and any political appointee or senior career official from the Biden-Harris administration that relates to your work as an illegal hack, and all documents and communications that you sent or received during your service relating to your works. Yeah, I'm sure just like Andrew Weissman, there's like, I can't remember the password on my phone. Oh, got it wrong again. Oop, got it wrong again. Oop, got it wrong again. Everything gets deleted. Isn't that interesting? Hey, Jack, please produce this material no later than October 28th. All right. And pursuant to the rules, we're authorized to conduct oversight. So thank you for your prompt attention to this matter. Jim, not sure you're going to get much from him. Think the next appropriate step is going to be a subpoena. This is where they're going. I know we kind of make fun of Jim and James and the rest of them for all their letters, but they do have to go through a sequence. I mean, to be fair to them, right? So you want to come in voluntarily? Nope. All right. It's subpoena time. So we'll see if that ultimately happens, but they're not happy about this spying on the Congress people. And so if Jay Bratt and Thomas Windham want to invoke their Fifth Amendment, that's fine. You're free to do that. We'll bring Jack in and everybody else and continue our inquiry accordingly. Now, Chuck Grassley is also looking into this. He sent this one out to Verizon and he's sharing it with us today. He says, as part of our ongoing investigation into Jack Smith and the FBI and Arctic Frost and all the things, we sent letters to 4 telecommunications companies asking for answers. Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Lumen. All got them. We want to know about the records that they gave over to Jack Smith. So that's just great. As part of this case, they all thought they were going to get away with it too. Like, oh, it's okay. We're going to put Trump in jail. We're going to win. We can do whatever we want. There'll be no consequences because we're rigging it in our favor. Then they lost. And now they're like, holy crap. Chuck Grassley's sending us letters. Grassley's oversight recently revealed that Jack Smith and the Biden FBI secretly, without even notification, notifying them, subpoenaed phone records from 9 Republican members of Congress. It's wild. And other 92 Republican targets like Charlie Kirk, Turning Point, everyone else, as part of this probe. And now we know 30 million lines of other phone records from everybody else. Not to mention, we were all on lists anyways for objecting to COVID, objecting to the election, and the list goes on and on. They were censoring us. They were sending letters from the White House, Rob Flaherty, to Elvis Chan, FBI over in San Francisco, and they were just colluding to censor and suppress everybody. And if they could charge you, man, or go after your law license or go after your medical license or whatever, they were doing it because they're bloodlusty communists. So here, all these people co-signed the letters. We also sent letters, the following federal entities, and let's take a look at some of them. Here's one that went over to Verizon. Oh, hey, Mr. Dan Schulman, you're the CEO at Verizon. You got a lot on your plate. Now you have a letter from the Judiciary Committee chairman and a senator called Chuck Grassley. He says, all right, Verizon CEO. On October 6th, Dan Bongino, shout out, informed us that as part of Biden's Arctic frost investigation that you guys just handed over documents on, by September 27, 2023, officials in Washington, they possessed call logs from the personal phones. Lindsey Graham is having a meltdown. At least 9 members of Congress. According to Bongino, the FBI obtained call logs from January 4th to January 7th, all inbound and outbound calls. Oh my goodness. From their personal phones. From the affected members' phone carriers. Below is a snapshot of the FBI's document listing the members that Jack Smith targeted. Mike Kelly, they're all probably good. Marsha Blackburn's good. Cynthia Loomis, Ron Johnson, stand-up dude, Tuberville, Sullivan, Hawley, Bill Haggerty, Mike Kelly. Yeah, Lindsey Graham. He's like, man, I don't know. By law, the senators' offices retain possession of their Senate data from both dual-use and Senate-specific devices, and service providers don't acquire any of that data. That's interesting, okay? So, like, in other words, the communications companies should have had their legal teams probably look at this and fight it. It's in the U.S. code. You don't have a right to go get all of that. By law, we retain the possession of all of the data. And moreover, no court order or provision of law can prevent you from notifying senators of any legal process that sought disclosure of any Senate data transmitted on any devices relating to their offices. Even if the phone numbers above do not fall into those categories, there are serious constitutional questions that those communications are still subject to constitutional protections, and you shouldn't have just given it all up. Indeed, the time period that Jack Smith focused his secret efforts to get these records from constitutional officers, it falls squarely within a core constitutional duty: certification of the Electoral College. That raises a reasonable concern that calls, texts, and emails may have been acts consistent with the duties of the office. Okay, it's like a big important time, and they're sending a lot of messages, and you're gobbling those up. Those are official communications, and you shouldn't have just given those out to the Biden administration. They all did because that was their team, and they didn't want to anger them. And, you know, it's hard when like Zuckerberg. Many of these people, I think, willingly kind of bent the knee. Now they're like, no, I got a lot of pressure. You know, sorry, we screwed up. Yeah. Okay, Zuck, like, we know you donated like $400 million to help the Democrats. So don't like act like, oh no, I had to buckle to the pressure from the White House. I'm sure that is true. And I'm sure he was trying to buy political favor. I don't know if he's actually a communist lover or not, but it was for a political end, right? So the mea culpa thing just doesn't carry much water with us. But the Verizon company, AT&T, all of them. Oh yeah, you need some Republican data? Sure, here you go. They ran this by their lawyers, and their lawyers were like, yeah, just give it to them. It's sitting senators. There should be an inquiry for all of these people. Accordingly, we request the records of all requests or orders made by the DOJ, and they better give it to them, or we're going to haul these CEOs right into Congress, or any federal law enforcement agency to you. Any materials that you got, legal process, all data, all the things about any of these members, give it to us. Please answer the questions. Did the subpoenas that you got from Jack Smith and the Biden DOJ for the affected members' toll records, did they seek the information by name or by phone number? Like, did they have their number? Because if they got their number, and maybe they got that number from another message of somebody who's an actual criminal. It's like, well, this criminal did something bad and he's texting a senator. They get the number, backtrace the number. They're like, oh, dang, that's Lindsey Graham. Or did they just want the names? So were they kind of backing into this by saying, well, we saw them together at an event. We still don't know what the commonality is between these 9. Why were they the ones being targeted? We'll see if we can find that out. Did the DOJ or the FBI, Verizon, Mr. CEO, did they place your company under a gag order so that you can't even tell the senators about this or other non-disclosure requirements? Why didn't you notify us? And if yes, on what basis? Is the gag order still in place? Do you have other records that you're not telling us about or that you've handed over? Provide copies of all gag orders that your company received, both through legal process and informally, related to the affected members. And if not, why didn't you notify us that you gave our records to the Biden DOJ, the opposite political party? What data or information, this is a big one, from the affected members was ultimately provided? What did you give to them? The overseas numbers too? Include the date of the request, the date of the data, and whether there were any notifications. Did the DOJ or the FBI seek content? Not only did you call this person and when and how long was the call and where did the call originate from and all the things, but what about the content? Did you get a request for that? So you better let us know. Were there any notifications? Were there other members besides these 9 that we know about that were the subject of subpoenas? If so, let us know. Big question. Did you challenge this on any grounds? Like, did your lawyers look at this? Or it's like, oh, sure, we hate Lindsey Graham or Tommy Tuberville at all? Or did you just voluntarily give it because you had a dog in the fight? Please explain and note the outcomes. And if you didn't object, why not? And which company officers approved the release of this information to the government? We want names and the names of the lawyers who approved it and said, no, yeah, it's totally in compliance with the law. Give it to them. Who were they? Given the urgency and seriousness of this, we want you to provide this information no later than October 25th, signed by a bunch of senators. Grassley, Johnson, Blackburn, Lindsey, Hawley, Hagerty, Loomis, Sullivan, Cornyn, Tuberville, Lee, Cruz, Kennedy, Tillis, Schmidt, Tillis is on there, Britt, Moody, and Mike Kelly, a U.S. representative, all saying Verizon, AT&T, and the rest of you, let us know what these people were up to